Okay, so here's part 2 of our contrast exercise. This is going to be a higher contrast piece, and I'm also meditating on the idea of yin and yang, the two opposites, and finding balance there. So I am finding the diameter of my circular watercolor paper, and I'm going to have one side dark and one side light, and then work both sides with my symbols to find balance. So now I'm taking a large brush with water, and I'm going to wet the entire left side of the paper to prepare it for color. And of course, when you add the water by itself and then add the color in, there's a lot more wild, intuitive things that can occur with the watercolor, and it allows us to really allow for freedom and a little bit of chaos and release the control, right? Because creativity wants us to release control and find a flow. And so I'm choosing blues and blue-greens on this side, keeping the palette pretty cool, filling everything with a variety of greens and blues and turquoises that I'm finding in my watercolor palette. I also add just a little bit of this purplish gray to act as a neutral and break up the saturation of this side. And that color will carry on through the piece in subtle ways. So now I'm ready to work on the positive or light side of the piece. And you can add just the water and then add the color into it, or you can just start with the color. You can also sketch or draw your image before painting it on. I've painted many, many magnolias, and so I'm completely freestyling with this grayish purple color. Also, the left side is still wet, and I wanted the left side and the lines that I'm putting on the right to interact with each other if they ended up touching, which they do, and I think is quite beautiful. So you could really play with that a lot with whatever your symbol is as well. Adding a little bit of blue and blue-green to mimic the left side and have the colors feel cohesive. So now everything's dry and I'm looking at my thumbnail sketch and seeing what I need to add on the left side to bring that magnolia flower over. So I'm adding a little bit of bright white, a little bit of that parchment green, some other sort of creamy khaki color, some blue, and some orchid purple. And I don't end up using that blue at all. So sometimes you just put things on the palette and you don't end up using them, but it's nice to have them out. So you can draw out the image or you can freehand. Just really depends on your confidence and experience and how structured you'd like to make your piece. Sometimes I draw a lot beforehand. Sometimes I just let the flow take me there and trust in my mark making. So I'm referencing that little sketch and adding the petals with the white paint. And like I said, this paper is quite textural, so I'll need a lot of coats to get those lines to be crisp and white. And so I invite you, when you come to places that seem a little tedious or boring in the piece, to allow yourself to sit up a little taller, take some deep breaths, and just smile and revel in the fact that we have this beautiful creativity within us. All right. So now I'm going to add some different symbols in this piece while letting the magnolia really be the star of the show. So I'm using this tube of paint to draw my circle for me so that I can create that little balance symbol within the petal, also echoing the composition and the duality, the yin and yang, and striving for balance between the duality. Like with the last piece, this piece is really not overwhelmingly filled with stuff and color, and I'm allowing for a lot of spaciousness to occur. So this might be the feel that you would like to evoke with your symbols. You might have a really maximalist, wild, expressionistic painting. So I always invite you to tune in to what you are feeling your symbol wants to portray to you or wants to speak to you, and then find the colors and the materials and the mark making to allow that to come through in the piece. So of course, when you paint light over dark, oftentimes you need a few layers. And also, depending on what type of material you use, you might need more layers. So a more inexpensive craft paint is going to be less opaque, and a nice brand of acrylic paint or any other material is obviously going to have a nicer coverage. So just work with what you've got and know that the materials will be a little different. So now on this raw watercolor paper side, I'm adding the elixir drip. And using some of the same colors that I used on the left side and getting it to feel like it belongs in the piece with that purplish gray color. Taking time to feel into the piece and see what it wants. I think it looks great right now, and I decide to add more. So it's up to you when you feel a piece of art is finished, or you've kind of had enough of it, or however you're feeling toward it. Oftentimes the piece asks for you to sit with it for a few moments here and there, and it will speak to you. It will tell you what it wants. So I'm adding these little portals, these little purple portals. And I feel like this purple echoes that grayish purple that I used with the watercolor, and I mixed it with a little bit of white, making it a tint, even more of a tint than it already was coming out of the tube, to have it echo and work as sort of a neutral, just breaking up the saturation and then adding a little bit more interest. So with a piece like this that is so sparse and airy with lots of spaciousness, being really particular and mindful about what you add and what colors you use is often successful. Sometimes it can not work, but you just try it out. So I'm switched to that liner brush to pull the lines for my star shape over here. Once again, you can always use a paint pen or a marker or gel pen or something else if you don't feel comfortable pulling lines with a brush. And if you are interested in pulling lines with a liner brush, just practice on a piece of paper. Practice, 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 and then when you feel confident, you can start trying it out on your nice artwork, on your nice paper. And as you've noticed from the previous lessons, it's really important to move your paper to serve you best so that you can paint confidently. Then I decide to cover up that white line, having it really feel fully balanced in that symbol. Coming back to the watercolor to add a snake. Of course I have to have a snake. The snake's gonna pop out of that little purple portal. And since I'm painting this snake after that left side is dry, I work with a variety of different color watercolors to make it appear as if it is seamlessly blending in with that left side. So lastly, I am adding some silver gel pen. You can also use a silver paint pen if you have one. And I feel like the silver really complements that pale purple well in this composition. And of course, using a metallic in your artwork is going to add some really lovely movement to the piece. When you're physically in front of it, it will shimmer and move with the light. So I often use metallics with my artwork. You can also use metal leaf. I like the Mona Lisa brand. It's great. You just want to make sure that you have a painted surface underneath because the glue will merge into a watercolor paper and it won't set very well. Just adding the icing on top. And then I've decided to have this crescent moon become silver as well. And with any water-based paint pen or gel pen, you can add a little bit of water on a brush and blend it and soften it. I use water with a brush a lot with the Posca paint pens as well. This also sets the moon back a little bit in the composition, value-wise, allowing the magnolia to really be the star. I hope you enjoyed this lesson.